General Do-hyun Park stood at the window of the cryogenic facility, watching the sunset over Seoul's rebuilt skyline. The year was 2157, and Earth was still recovering from its first alien invasion. His weathered hands traced the scars on his face, memories of the battles that had saved humanity fresh in his mind. "The chamber is ready, General," said Lieutenant Hae-yeon Kim. She was young, barely 25, but her eyes carried the same tired look everyone had after the war. She held a tablet showing the final checks of the cryogenic pod. Do-hyun turned away from the window. "Tell me again, Hae-yeon, why are we doing this?" "Because you're the best military mind Earth has ever seen," she answered. "The aliens might come back, or worse ones might come. We need to keep you safe for when that happens." Do-hyun walked over to his desk and picked up an old photograph. It showed him with his team from before the invasion. Most of them were gone now. "It feels like running away," he said quietly. "It's not running away," Hae-yeon replied firmly. "It's planning ahead. You taught us that." The medical team waited in the next room. Through the glass walls, Do-hyun could see the cryogenic pod. It looked like a simple bed, but it was filled with the most advanced technology humans had ever created. "I have a request," Do-hyun said, reaching for a small box on his desk. "Give this to whoever wakes me up." Inside the box was his old military compass, scratched and dented, but still working perfectly. Hae-yeon took the box carefully. "What should I tell them?" "Tell them it helped me find my way home during the darkest days of the war. Maybe it will help them too." Do-hyun smiled, but his eyes were serious. As they walked to the medical room, Do-hyun remembered the invasion. The alien ships had appeared suddenly, covering the sky like dark clouds. Everyone had thought Earth would fall in days, but humans turned out to be surprisingly good at war, and Do-hyun had been the best at outsmarting the aliens. The medical team helped Do-hyun into a simple white suit. Dr. Yoon checked his vital signs one last time. "The freezing process will be quick," she explained. "When you wake up, it will feel like only a moment has passed." Do-hyun lay down in the pod. The material was soft but cold. Above him, screens showed his heartbeat and brain activity. He looked at Hae-yeon. "Make sure they only wake me if there's no other choice. War should always be the last option." Hae-yeon nodded, holding back tears. "We'll remember, General." As the pod's lid started to close, Do-hyun thought about all the soldiers who had fought under his command. He thought about the cities that had burned and been rebuilt. He thought about the future wars he might have to fight when he woke up. "One last thing," he said quickly. "In the bottom drawer of my desk, there's a book. It's my journal from the war. Make sure whoever wakes me reads it first. They need to understand what war really costs." The pod sealed with a soft hiss. Cold mist filled the chamber. Do-hyun's last thought before sleep took him was a hope that he would never need to be awakened. Hae-yeon watched the monitors as they showed Do-hyun's vital signs slowing down. When the freezing process was complete, she placed her hand on the cold surface of the pod. "Sleep well, General," she whispered. "I hope we never need you again." But deep down, she knew that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, another war was waiting. And when it came, they would need the general who had never lost a battle. Outside the facility, the sun set on a peaceful Earth. In the frozen chamber below, humanity's greatest defender slept, waiting for the day when the galaxy would need him again. Admiral Taiwan Lee stared at the old Earth records on his screen. The year was 2387, and the Allied Species Federation was losing their war against the Collective. His ship, the Stellar Dawn, floated above Earth's atmosphere, waiting for permission to land. "Admiral, they've agreed to meet with us," said his assistant, showing him a message from Earth's government. Taiwan nodded slowly. After 200 years of keeping to themselves, humans were finally willing to talk. The landing pad was on top of a tall building in Seoul. The city had changed a lot since the old pictures in their records. Tall silver towers reached into the clouds, and flying vehicles moved between them like streams of light. Inside the building, Earth's Defense Council waited for them. An old woman stepped forward. "I am Director Su-Jin Ba. We understand you're here about General Park." Taiwan bowed slightly. "The Federation needs help. The Collective has destroyed 12 of our worlds. Our best military minds can't stop them." He paused, looking at the serious faces around him. "We found records of how Earth fought off its invasion. We need General Park's strategic mind." Su-Jin led them down to a deep underground facility. The walls were thick metal, and security cameras watched their every move. They stopped at a heavy door with the number 157 on it. "This is where he sleeps," Su-Jin said. "No one has entered this room in 200 years. She pressed her hand against a scanner. The door opened with a quiet whoosh of air. The cryogenic pod stood in the center of the room, covered in a thin layer of frost. Next to it, old monitors still showed General Park's vital signs, steady and unchanged after all these years. "Will he still be himself?" Taiwan asked, looking at the frozen figure inside. "The technology works perfectly," Su-Jin answered. "But remember, he's from a different time. Our world will be very strange to him." The medical team moved carefully around the pod, checking everything twice. One of them found a small box and an old book on a nearby shelf. "These were left for whoever woke him," she said, reading the note attached to them. The warming process began slowly. The frost on the pod melted away. The vital signs on the monitors started to speed up. Everyone in the room held their breath, watching. The pod opened with a soft click. General Do-hyun Park's eyes fluttered open. He looked exactly the same as in the old pictures, like time hadn't touched him at all. "How long?" were his first words, his voice rough from sleep. 230 years, General," Su-Jin answered gently. Do-hyun sat up slowly, his movements careful. His eyes moved around the room, taking in the strange uniforms and alien features of some people present. "Then this isn't about Earth," he said. It wasn't a question. Taiwan stepped forward. "The galaxy is at war, General. We need your help." A young officer handed Do-hyun the box and book that had been left for him. He opened the box first, touching the old compass inside with gentle fingers. Then he looked at the book, his own war journal. "Show me everything," Do-hyun said, his voice stronger now. "Show me what I'm waking up to." As they helped him stand, Do-hyun looked back at the pod. He remembered Lieutenant Hae-yeon Kim's face as it closed over him, remembered her hope that they would never need to wake him. That hope had lasted 2 centuries. "The Collective is unlike anything we've faced before," Taiwan explained as they walked. "They don't fight like any species we know." Do-hyun's lips curved into a small smile. "Good," he said. "That means they won't be ready for how humans fight either." Outside the facility, the world had changed beyond recognition. But war, Do-hyun knew, never really changed, and he had never lost a war. Do-hyun sat in the command center of the Stellar Dawn, watching holographic maps float in the air around him. Captain Jae-won-song stood nearby, explaining how the new technology worked. Everything was different from his time, but war maps were still war maps. "The red dots are collective ships," Jae-won said, pointing to a cluster of lights. "The blue ones are ours. The Collective always travels in groups of 7 ships." Do-hyun touched one of the red dots, and it expanded to show a detailed image of an alien ship. It looked like a dark spider with too many legs. "Why 7?" he asked. "We don't know," Jae-won admitted. "They never change this pattern. Our best generals haven't figured out why." Do-hyun smiled slightly. In his time, humans had learned that understanding your enemy's patterns was the first step to beating them. He pulled out his old compass, watching the needle spin in the artificial gravity of the ship. "Tell me about their weapons," he said, not looking up from the compass. Jae-won pressed some buttons, and new images appeared. "They use energy weapons mostly, beams that can cut through our strongest shields, and they have these swarms of small attack ships that—" "No," Du Hyun interrupted gently. Tell me what they're afraid of. Show me the battles they lost. Jae-won looked confused. But they haven't lost any battles. Everyone loses sometimes, Du Hyun said. Even if they won the battle, there must have been moments when they were worried. Show me those moments. They spent hours watching recordings of old battles. Du Hyun noticed things others had missed. The way the collective ships moved slightly slower after using their main weapons. How they never attacked planets with strong magnetic fields. Small details that added up to something important. A young officer brought them food. Du Hyun stared at the strange-looking meal. I miss rice, he said quietly. The officer quickly went to find him some. General, Jae-won said carefully, the Admiral wants your battle plan by tomorrow. The collective is moving toward another Federation world. Do Hyun closed his eyes, thinking about the old wars he had fought on Earth. The aliens then had been powerful too, but they had one weakness. They didn't understand how humans thought. Get me everything you have about their first attacks, he said. Not the battles. The first contact. The negotiations. The warnings they gave. Warnings? Jae-won looked surprised. They never gave any warnings. They just attacked. Do Hyun opened his eyes. Exactly. That's their first mistake. He stood up and walked to the main display. They don't understand the power of fear. They don't use it, which means they don't know how to handle it themselves. He touched the display, zooming in on the collective fleet. Captain, I need a ship. A small one, fast, and well-armed. And I need volunteers who aren't afraid to do something crazy. Jae-won nodded slowly. What are you planning, General? The collective thinks they know everything about fighting, Du Hyun said, his old compass still in his hand. But they've never fought humans before. We're going to show them why Earth's invaders gave up and never came back. As he spoke, Du Hyun remembered the words in his old war journal. The strongest enemy can be beaten if you make them doubt themselves. It had worked before. It would work again. Outside the command center windows, stars stretched endlessly into space. Somewhere out there, the collective was moving their ships, following their patterns of 7, never doubting their power. They didn't know that a human general was awake again. They didn't know that everything was about to change. Lieutenant Soo-min Choi watched from her small ship's cockpit as the collective fleet approached. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her heart was beating fast. General Park's plan seemed impossible, but she had volunteered anyway. Remember, Du Hyun's voice came through the radio. They always attack in groups of 7. That's not their strength. That's their weakness. Soo-min looked at her display. 35 collective ships were coming toward them, arranged in 5 perfect groups of 7. Behind her, hidden in the magnetic field of a gas giant, the Federation fleet waited. Begin, Du Hyun ordered quietly. Soo-min pushed her ship forward. 9 other small ships moved with her, all piloted by volunteers. They flew straight toward the collective fleet, looking like helpless targets. The collective ships moved exactly as Du Hyun had predicted. Each group of 7 split into their attack pattern, spreading out like dark spider webs in space. Now, Du Hyun said, show them what humans can do. Soo-min smiled and pressed the button. Her ship released thousands of tiny metal pieces into space. The other volunteer ships did the same. To anyone watching, it looked like their ships were falling apart. The collective ships flew right into the cloud of metal pieces. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the pieces started to move, pulled by the magnetic generators Du Hyun had ordered to be hidden inside them. The tiny metal parts stuck to the collective ship's sensors, blocking their view. More importantly, they disrupted the signals between the ships in each group of 7. Their pattern is broken, Soo-min reported, watching the collective ships start to move in confusion. Some tried to shoot their energy weapons, but the magnetic cloud around them made the beams scatter in wrong directions. Phase 2, Du Hyun commanded. The Federation fleet emerged from behind the gas giant. But instead of attacking all at once, they followed Du Hyun's strange plan. Each Federation ship targeted just one engine on each collective ship. Aim for their doubt, Du Hyun had told them. Don't destroy them. Make them feel trapped. The collective ships started to panic. Without their perfect formations, and with their weapons firing randomly, they couldn't coordinate. Some tried to escape, but their damaged engines only let them move in circles. Su-min watched in amazement. The mighty collective fleet was falling apart, not from destruction, but from confusion and fear, just as Du Hyun had planned. Send the message, Du Hyun ordered. The Federation ships broadcast a simple message in the collective's language. Your pattern is broken. Retreat or be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to decide. For 4 long minutes, nothing happened. Su-min held her breath. Then, one by one, the collective ships turned around. Their retreat was slow and clumsy with their damaged engines, but they were leaving. Should we finish them off? Admiral Lee asked over the radio. No, Du Hyun replied. Let them go. Let them tell others what happened here. Fear works better when it spreads by itself. Back on the stellar dawn, Su-min found Du Hyun looking out a window at the retreating collective ships. He was holding his old compass. How did you know it would work? She asked. Du Hyun turned to her with a small smile. Because they didn't understand humans. They thought pattern meant strength. But humans know that true strength is being able to break patterns. He looked back at the stars. They'll be back, but they'll be different. They'll be afraid. The victory news spread quickly through the Federation. The unbeatable collective had finally been beaten, not by superior weapons or stronger ships, but by a human general who understood that even the strongest enemy could be defeated by their own fear. A month after the great victory, Du Hyun sat in a quiet room on the stellar dawn, reading reports about other wars across the galaxy. Commander Yoon-hee Kang stood in front of him, her face serious as she showed him classified files. I don't understand, Du Hyun said, putting down a report. The Federation told me the collective was the only threat. The Federation tells people what they need to know, Yoon-hee replied quietly. There are 17 other wars happening right now in different parts of the galaxy. Du Hyun picked up his old compass, watching the needle spin. The scratches on its surface reminded him of simpler times. They want to wake me up for all of them, don't they? Yoon-hee nodded slowly. The Federation Council had a meeting yesterday. They want to keep you awake permanently. They're calling you the ultimate weapon. Du Hyun stood up and walked to the window. The stars looked cold and distant. Show me the truth about the collective war, he said. The part they didn't tell me. Yoon-hee touched her screen, and new images appeared. They showed Federation ships attacking peaceful collective worlds long before the war started. The Federation had fired the first shot, not the collective. They needed someone who could win the war, Yoon-hee explained. But they knew you wouldn't help if you knew they started it. You were too honest. Du Hyun touched the window, his reflection looking tired in the glass. How many other wars did they start? Too many, Yoon-hee whispered. The Federation isn't what it pretends to be. They don't want peace. They want control. Du Hyun turned back to her. Why are you telling me this? You're risking your life. Because I read your war journal, she answered. The one you left before going into cryo-sleep. You wrote that the worst evil in war is lying about why we fight. I believe that too. Du Hyun sat down again, feeling the weight of 2 centuries on his shoulders. They'll never let me go back to sleep now. They need me too much. You're wrong, Yoon-hee said. They're afraid of you now. Your victory against the collective showed them how powerful you are. They're worried what you'll do when you learn the truth. Du Hyun smiled slightly. Then let's give them a reason to be afraid. He pressed a button, sending a message to Admiral Lee. Tell the Admiral I want a meeting with the full Federation Council. Tell them it's about improving our war strategies. Yoon-hee looked worried. What are you planning? They woke me to win their wars, Du Hyun said, standing up straight. But they forgot something important. Humans don't just know how to fight wars. We know how to end them. 3 days later, Do-hyun stood before the Federation Council. His old compass was in his pocket, and his war journal was in his hand. "You have a choice," he told them. "Either you let me go back to sleep, or I tell everyone the truth about your wars. About who really started them. About what the Federation really is." The council members looked at each other nervously. They had created their perfect weapon, but now they realized their weapon had a mind of its own, and a conscience. "I'll make you a deal," Do-hyun continued. "I'll go back to sleep. Wake me only when there's a real threat to peace. No more lies. No more secret wars. Or I become your worst enemy instead of your weapon." In the end, the Federation Council agreed. They had no choice. The human general they had hoped to control had outmaneuvered them, just like he had outmaneuvered the collective. That night, as Do-hyun prepared to return to cryo-sleep, he looked at Yoon-hee. "If they wake me again, make sure it's for the right reasons." Yoon-hee nodded, holding his war journal. "Sleep well, General. And thank you for teaching us that winning isn't always about fighting." The cryopod opened with a soft hiss. Do-hyun opened his eyes slowly, already feeling tired despite his long sleep. Major Min-seo Park stood over him, holding his old compass and war journal. "How long this time?" Do-hyun asked, his voice rough from sleep. 69 years, Min-seo answered. "The year is 2456, and before you ask, yes, this is a real threat. Commander Kang made sure we followed your rules." Do-hyun sat up carefully, looking around the room. Everything was different again. The medical equipment looked even more advanced, and through the window, he could see ships he didn't recognize. "Tell me," he said simply. Min-seo helped him stand and handed him a warm drink. 3 months ago, we detected something coming from dark space, the empty area between galaxies. At first, we thought it was just another species looking for a new home." She touched a screen, and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed a massive object moving through space. It looked like a black cloud, but sometimes parts of it would become solid, forming shapes that didn't make sense. "They don't talk," Min-seo continued. "They don't respond to messages. They just take things. Ships, stations, even small moons. Everything they touch disappears into that darkness." Do-hyun walked closer to the hologram, studying the strange movements of the black cloud. Something about it seemed familiar, like an old memory trying to surface. "Show me where they came from," he said. "The exact direction." Min-seo adjusted the hologram, drawing a line backward through space. The line went out of the galaxy through the darkness between stars. And then, "Stop," Do-hyun said suddenly. "Go back to that point." The hologram zoomed in on a spot of empty space, but Do-hyun was already pulling out his old compass. The needle spun wildly, just like it had 2 centuries ago during Earth's first alien invasion. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. "Not these exact beings, but something like them. They were in Earth's old records, from before my time. Ancient stories about shadows that ate light." Min-seo looked confused. "What do you mean?" Do-hyun touched the hologram, his fingers passing through the image of the black cloud. "The aliens who attacked Earth in my time, they weren't running from us. They were running from something else, something that had destroyed their home galaxy." He turned to Min-seo, his eyes serious. "Where's Commander Kang's daughter? She should be the head of intelligence by now." "How did you know?" Min-seo asked, surprised. "Because Yoon-hee Kang was smart. She would have trained her children to watch the Federation, to make sure they kept their promise to me." Do-hyun smiled slightly. "And she would have kept the real records of what happened before." Min-seo nodded. "Director Maijin Kang is waiting for you in the command center. She has her mother's old files, and some new ones you need to see." As they walked through the station, Do-hyun noticed how people looked at him, not with fear or awe like before, but with hope. The Federation had changed in 69 years. Maybe they had learned something after all. One question, he said as they reached the command center. Did anyone wake me during those 69 years? For any reason? No, Min Seo answered. There were wars, but the Federation kept their promise. They handled them without you. She paused. They learned that not every problem needs humanity's greatest general to solve it. Do Hyun touched his compass again. Good, because we're going to need everyone's help for what's coming. This enemy, they're not here for our weapons or our worlds. He looked out at the stars, remembering those ancient records he had read so long ago. They're here to end everything. And we need to know why. Colonel Dae Jung-shin watched as General Park studied the ancient Earth records spread across the command center's main table. The records were so old that they had to be carefully scanned and converted into modern text. Some were cave paintings, others were stories passed down through generations. All of them say the same thing, Do Hyun said, pointing to different images. The shadows came from between the stars. They took everything they touched, and then they disappeared, leaving only stories behind. Dae Jung looked at the pictures. One showed black shapes eating the sun. Another showed people running from moving darkness. But why did they leave? And why are they back now? That's what we need to find out, Do Hyun answered. He touched his old compass, which hadn't stopped spinning since they detected the shadow beings. Something about us made them go away last time. Something about Earth or humans or both. Dr. Jinna Yang walked into the room, carrying more data tablets. She was a temporal psychologist, someone who helped people deal with time displacement. The Federation had created this new job after learning from Do Hyun's experiences. How are you feeling, General? She asked, setting down the tablets. This is your second awakening in what feels like days to you. But the world has changed again. Do Hyun looked up at her. I feel tired, not in my body, but in my mind. Every time I wake up, everything I know is history. Everyone I knew is gone. He paused, except the Kang family, who keeps watching over me. Jinna nodded understanding. That's normal. Your mind needs time to accept each new reality. But right now, you're trying to save us all without taking that time. We don't have time, Dae Jung said, pointing to the latest scans. The shadow beings had taken 3 more moons since morning. They're getting closer to populated worlds. Do Hyun stood up and walked to the window. The station's lights reflected off the glass, making it look like stars were inside the room. Tell me about the worlds they've taken, he said. Not the strategic reports. Tell me about the people who lived there. Jinna picked up a tablet. The first moon they took had a small research station. 15 people. They were studying space plants that could survive in darkness. She swiped to another report. The second moon had mining robots. No people, but the robots were programmed to sing while they worked, to tell each other where they were. Do Hyun turned around suddenly. Say that again. The robots sang. Jinna looked confused. It was an old Earth practice from mining days. The company that made the robots thought it would help them work better together. And the research station, Do Hyun said quickly. They were studying plants that lived in darkness. He started pacing, his mind racing. The third moon, what was special about it? Dae Jung checked the reports. It had a lighthouse, a space lighthouse that helped ships navigate through asteroid fields. Do Hyun picked up his war journal and flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. Listen to this, he said. From Earth's first alien invasion. They feared our art more than our weapons. They couldn't understand why we made beautiful things that had no purpose. Jinna's eyes widened. You think these shadow beings? They're taking things that create, Do Hyun said. Plants that make their own light. Robots that make music. Lighthouses that make safe paths through darkness. He looked at the ancient cave paintings again. We've been asking the wrong questions. We thought they were here to destroy. But what if they're here to learn? As if to answer his question, the lights in the station flickered. Through the window, They could see a dark cloud approaching, bigger than any they had seen before. The shadow beings had found them. Do-hyun touched his compass one last time, then put it down on the table. "Get me a communication channel," he said, "the biggest one we have, and find me someone who can sing." Captain Hai-jin Kim stood at her station, watching the massive shadow cloud approach the Federation's main space station. Beside her, General Park was doing something no one expected. He was setting up music equipment. "The biggest speakers we have are ready," Hai-jin reported. "But General, are you sure about this? No one has ever survived direct contact with them." Do-hyun nodded, connecting the last wire. "They've been studying us," he said. "Everything they took was something that created light, music, safety. They're not here to destroy. They're here to understand." The shadow beings were close now. Their darkness spread across the stars like spilled ink. The station's lights flickered as the beings' power affected their systems. "Play the first song," Do-hyun ordered. Hai-jin pressed a button. The mining robot's working song played through the giant speakers. Its simple melody echoed through space. The shadow cloud stopped moving. "Now the lighthouse signal," Do-hyun said. A pattern of light pulses shot out from the station's beacons, the same pattern the space lighthouse had used to guide ships. The shadow being's cloud shape changed, forming patterns that matched the light pulses. "They're copying us," Dr. Jinai Yang said excitedly. "They're learning." Do-hyun picked up his old compass. Its needle was spinning faster than ever. "Now," he said, "show them everything. All of it. Every song, every light pattern, every beautiful thing humans have ever made." Hai-jin entered the commands. The station lit up with thousands of years of human creativity. Art from Earth's ancient caves, songs from every culture, light shows from space celebrations, poems turned into patterns of sound and light. The shadow being's cloud expanded, surrounding the station, but instead of destroying it, they started to change. Parts of their darkness became transparent, showing colors no one had seen before. "They're not attacking," Colonel Shin said in amazement. "They're dancing." Do-hyun smiled. "They're sharing back," he said, "showing us their own art, their own creation." He touched the window where the colors swirled. All this time, they were looking for others who could create beauty from nothing, like them. Through the speakers came new sounds, the shadow being's own music. It was strange but beautiful, like whispers turned into songs. The station's computers recorded everything, saving humanity's first artistic exchange with the shadow beings. "General," Hai-jin said suddenly, "look at your compass." Do-hyun's old compass had stopped spinning. Instead, its needle pointed straight at the shadow beings, as if it had finally found true north. "Of course," he said softly. "The aliens who attacked Earth in my time, they ran because they couldn't understand art. They couldn't understand creating something just for its beauty. But these beings," he gestured at the swirling colors outside, "they've been searching the galaxies for others who create." The shadow beings began to move again, but not to attack. They formed shapes in space, recreations of Earth's art, but made of living darkness and impossible colors. It was their way of saying hello. "Send a message to all Federation worlds," Do-hyun ordered. "Tell them to prepare their biggest speakers, their brightest lights. Tell them to share their art, their music, their stories." He watched the shadow beings dance among the stars. The greatest war humanity ever faced didn't need weapons to end. It needed beauty. Outside the station, darkness and light mixed together in a display that would be remembered for centuries. The day humanity learned that sometimes the best strategy isn't to fight, it's to create something beautiful. 1 month after the shadow being's revelation, Do-hyun stood in his old cryo chamber room. The pod waited silently, its surface reflecting the room's soft light. Director Mi-jin Kang, Commander Yoon-hee's granddaughter, stood with him. "Are you sure about this?" Mi-jin asked, holding his war journal. "The Federation has changed. They're not the same people who tried to use you as a weapon. You could stay awake. Help us learn from the shadow beings. Do-hyun touched the cold surface of the pod. That's exactly why I need to go back to sleep, he said. The Federation has learned to solve problems without waking humanity's greatest general. They've learned there are more solutions than just fighting. Through the window, they could see the new art exchange station being built. It was a place where humans and shadow beings could share their creations. The station's design itself was a work of art, with patterns of light and darkness dancing across its surface. Besides, Do-hyun smiled, I'm tired of losing everyone I know to time. Better to sleep until I'm truly needed again. Dr. Jin Yang entered the room, carrying Do-hyun's final medical report. Your body is ready for cryo-sleep, she said. But first, the Federation Council wants to show you something. They walked to the station's main hall. Hundreds of people waited there, along with several shadow beings who had chosen to stay and learn from humans. The council leader stepped forward. General Park, she said, we've created something for you. Something to help you find your way home, no matter how long you sleep. She pressed a button, and the hall's lights dimmed. Above them, thousands of tiny lights formed shapes in the air. Do-hyun recognized them. They were scenes from his life, from Earth's old wars to the shadow beings' dance, all turned into constellation-like patterns of stars. The shadow beings helped us make it, the council leader explained. Now every Federation station will have these star patterns. As long as humans travel space, they'll remember the general who taught us that understanding is stronger than fear. Do-hyun took out his old compass. For the first time since the shadow beings arrived, its needle pointed straight up, toward the new constellations. He handed the compass to Mi-jin. Keep this safe, he said. Give it to whoever wakes me next. Tell them to look for the beauty in their enemies before they look for ways to defeat them. Later, as Do-hyun prepared to enter the cryopod one last time, he looked at the small crowd gathered to say goodbye. Dr. Yang, who had helped him understand his place in time. Colonel Shin, who had trusted his strange plan. Captain Kim, who had helped him share humanity's art with the stars. Remember, he told them, the greatest weapon Earth ever had wasn't our generals or our guns. It was our ability to create beauty from nothing, to make art that touches hearts across the galaxy. The pod began to close. Through its clear top, Do-hyun could see the star patterns twinkling above. Among them, made of light and shadow together, was a new constellation, a compass pointing the way home. As sleep took him, Do-hyun smiled. For the first time, he wasn't worried about what wars might wake him. He knew now that humanity had learned its greatest lesson. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to turn it into art instead. Years would pass. The Federation would face new challenges. But they never again woke the general just because there was a war. They remembered his real legacy. That understanding, creativity, and beauty could solve problems that weapons never could. And somewhere in the galaxy, shadow beings and humans danced together among the stars, creating art that would last longer than any war.